Alrighty, welcome back to another asynchronous assignment. This time taking a little detour from all the trig stuff we've been doing and looking at how do we solve quadratics. These problems have started to come up in your homework and you're going to see them come up even more. Solving quadratics, a few things to keep in mind. One, when we are solving for quadratics, quadratic being this x squared being the highest term is how I know it's a quadratic, meaning a parabola. And when I'm solving for a quadratic, I'm solving for the roots or the x-intercepts or the zeros, right? All three of those mean the same thing, of that parabola. So there's a few important things. The first thing is that when you're solving a quadratic, you want it to be equal to 0. I'll tell you why in a minute. But so I want this to be equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. And here's why. The reason we want it to be equal to 0 is so that we can use something called the zero product property. And the zero product property says that if I have two things that multiply together to be 0, right? The product meaning multiply. Product means multiply. The only way to get out 0 is if one of those numbers is 0. Right? The only way to get out 0 in multiplication is to multiply by 0. Right? 0 times anything we know is 0. So one of these has to be 0. So this is a really powerful property. It's the only one that really allows us to know what a number would be. And this is what we want to use when solving quadratics. So in order to use the zero product property, I need to have a product. I need to have two things being multiplied. So the first thing I want you to think when you're solving a quadratic is 1, it must be equal to 0, and 2, I must factor. Factor meaning break this up into multiplication. So in order to factor this, I like to use an area model. You can do whatever you want. But right, I'm trying to get this to two things that multiply together to be 0. And I'll go over here to use my area model. It means the 2x squared, the negative 1. All of this is the inside. It's the area. So that we know the diagonals are going to be like terms that need to add up to negative x. And factoring is trying to find the outside. What two things multiplied together to give me the inside? So I know to get 2x squared, I'd have to have a 2x times x. And it can be a little bit tricky. The multiplying to 1, I know it's only 1 and 1, like we don't have a lot of options. And so we've got to kind of work here. The reason factoring is challenging is because there's no obvious, like you have to think about it, right? And then sometimes we don't like that. But here, I'm going to go ahead and say 2x times 1 gives me a 2x right here. And because they need to add up to a negative, that's a negative 2x. This is a positive 1x. So I can check 1 times negative 1, negative 1. And then these two add up to negative x, which makes my factors of this 2x plus 1 and x minus 1. And now here is the part, right? Here is where I get to use my zero product property. Because here, right, we don't necessarily need to write the dot, but I've got two things that multiply together to be 0. It means I can say either the first one equals 0 or the second one equals 0. So I'm looking for like what numbers would make this 0. I hope you could think about it. Or what numbers would make that 0. And those are my solutions. How does that look algebraically? It looks like us splitting our equation up into two different equations using the zero product property. Either 2x plus 1 equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. And then I could quickly solve each of those to get the solutions of my equation of x equals 1 and x equals negative a half. So again, let's do a little review for you before I jump into the problems I want you to try today. When solving quadratics, one must be equal to 0. 2, we're usually going to factor. And then 3, using that 0 product property. Let's look at one more example real quick. All right, so again, just walking us through one more example following these steps. Equal to 0, factor, 0 product property. Here, of course, first I need it to be equal to 0. And now I need to factor. Factor is certainly the trickiest part of this. Let's see how I do here. Multiplies together to be 7. That means my options are 7 and 1. So I'm making this a 7 because that'll get multiplied by 3x. 3x times 7 is 21. And so when I add 21 plus 1x, I get this out. You could also confirm that with the area model. Of course, I've done a lot of factoring in my life, so I might be a little bit quicker than you. And from there, I get to use my 0 product property. Set my two things both equal to 0 to get 3x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 7 equals 0, and here are my solutions. Now, some of you wondering how many steps you can skip. This is the bare minimum that I would need to see. I need to see equal to 0, need to see factors, need to see 0 product property. You'll notice I didn't make you show -1 divided by 3. But this is the bare minimum I need to see for your asynchronous assignment. 2 problems coming up. Here we go. 2 problems for you to solve, working on that factoring, all that good stuff. Submit a picture. Let me know if you have any questions. I look forward, as always, to seeing your work.